How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana DeRote.
Chapter 74. Mace 9, Jocasta 2.
Mace stood in front of the entrance to the La clan compound the morning after the battle. He had a bad feeling about this. Granted, not in the Force for once. No, instead, it was his growing understanding of Mandalorians, and Holden Law in particular, that were warning him. Not that there was anything he could do about it. He sighed before giving his name to the small droid manning the gate.
Jedi Master Mace Windu.
The droid's photoreceptors widened.
Welcome, Master Windu of Clan Fey and La.
Mace stiffened. His bad feeling was definitely correct. The door slid open to show Holdan, his long black hair in a casual braid, approaching hurriedly. The sounds of what was probably a raucous breakfast and even the growls of a strill were echoing through the entrance corridor.
Mace.
La gave him a charming smile.
Would it make any difference if I detailed how Jedi lineages differ from Mandalorian clans, and that the Padawan chip is not an adoption?
Asked Mace.
Not in the slightest,
said La pleasantly.
Now we have to get back to Obi-Wan. It's been a full-time job this morning keeping anyone from jostling his ribs.
Mace strengthened his mental shields and nodded.
Let's go.
Can we watch?
Asked one of the many children of Clan La. Mace looked to Obi-Wan, who nodded. Some Jedi preferred to keep the first braiding of their Padawan's hair a private experience, while others considered it something to be done in public. Mace had no preference, so he deferred to his Padawan.
There won't be much to see,
he warned, but Clan La was hardly undeterred. The adults were lingering around the edges of the open plaza at the center of the Clan La compound, while the children blatantly followed them into the clearing. Mace had intended to just sit Obi-Wan down cross-legged in front of him, but that was foiled by the Strill coming up and sitting down nearly on top of him.
Don't remind the Strill about your ribs, Obi-Wan,
said Mace. He'd been surprised by the strength of Obi-Wan's mental voice when bonding with him yesterday on Concordia, but that strength meant he should be able to reach the Strill crowding him quite easily. It was probably why the beast had adopted him so thoroughly. Or, well, perhaps that was just a propensity of all creatures on Mandalore in addition to its peoples? Mace mentally thanked the Force that mythosaurs were extinct. But, speaking of mythosaurs, he pulled out the small beige bead and golden thread he had gotten in the market on the way to the La's this morning. He began braiding. Obi-Wan, like many initiates his age, had kept his hair longer, so there would be enough hair to start the Padawan braid, and a few weeks away from the temple had made it longer still. He held out the bead to Obi-Wan so he could examine it before Mace put it in his hair.
The merchant said this was carved mythosaur bone.
There was a crudely carved mythosaur face on one side of it, resembling the symbol of the true Mandalorians.
I thought it was appropriate.
He was rewarded with a smile from his now red-faced Padawan.
Mace used the golden thread to secure the top of the braid, then quickly did the rest, holding out his hand for the bead when he reached the end. He used the thread to secure it near the bottom. In the end, it fell just below Obi-Wan's ear.
I'll look forward to seeing it grow longer,
said Mace.
Thank you, Master. It's tradition that I inform you to not mind Armorer Sok To Ni. He's a grumpy old man,
said Holdan. Obi-Wan was nodding his agreement.
I see,
said Mace neutrally. Sure enough, the first response when they knocked on the metal door was,
"Go away!"
The faster you listen to Obiga's report, the faster you can get rid of us.
Holdan almost sing-songed through the intercom. Obi-Wan winced a little at the cursing from inside, but Holdan seemed relaxed. Finally, the door slid open. Armorer Ni was a red Nikto wearing a visor which magnified his eyes. He grudgingly ushered Holdan and Obi-Wan in before blinking wide eyes at Mace.
"Another jetty! Do they grow on trees?" the armorer muttered.
"Some of us do,"
responded Mace, keeping his face solemn as he thought of Tressa, a living tree of a Jedi.
Holdan had a delighted smile on his face at Mace's response.
Obi-Wan didn't seem to notice, as he was anxious about giving his report. The armorer gave Mace a sharp look before his eyes strayed back to a glowing forge.
"Yoko, start talking,"
the Nikto said, gesturing at Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan looked to Holdan, who nodded encouragingly. His Padawan started the report, only frowning a little when he wandered away towards the forge. Besides Mace, Holdan sighed. Mace wasn't impressed by the armorer's rudeness, but at least it was obvious he was listening since he abruptly dropped a glowing piece of metal back into the forge when Obi-Wan got to the part about finding a Jedi Mandalorian temple and Tade Vizsla's holocron. Obi-Wan started to talk about being kidnapped, but Nee waved a hand in a shushing gesture, having given up paying attention to his forge.
No need for that. You passed. Congratulations.
But I didn't return on time, protested Obi-Wan.
I believe I said report when you return. And you did, said Nee. Now try this on. I want to see if it works.
The armorer picked up a shiny Beskar vambrace from a shelf, smaller than an adult's vambrace.
It's for your left arm. You need to figure out what mods you want for your right one before I make it.
Obi-Wan rolled up the robe of his left arm and slipped the vambrace over his tunic's sleeve. Looking at it closely, you could see that while the top closer to Obi-Wan's elbow was all one piece, the end of his wrist was made up of interlocking pieces of Beskar that flexed when he moved his wrist up and down. Obi-Wan didn't need to be asked, as he pulled out his yun-lit lightsaber and moved his arms through some flashy Ataru twirls, carefully making sure he didn't move his torso much due to the injured ribs.
It works very well, sir,
said Obi-Wan.
I thought so,
said Nee, sounding smug. He turned to look at Mace, then blinked his magnified eyes.
Is that Sutra's work? Never mind. It has to be. Your work is so flashy.
I think it's beautiful,
said Mace a bit stiffly. Nee waved a hand.
Of course you would.
He turned to point at Holden.
La, I don't care if Sutra adds the embellishments, but you had better be getting his base armor from me. My ideas for Jedi armor are the best.
Yes, Armorer Nee, said Holden dutifully. Could I have some extra crackers for Obika? No need for the sigil.
The crackers themselves were quite tiny, about the size of a pill. They were dumped in Holden's hand before shooing them out the door.
Grumpy was an understatement,
said Mace once they were outside. Holden laughed as they ushered them away from the door.
I've never seen him ruin a piece before like he did while listening to Obi-Wan. And did you see how he made him a vambrace? He made me wait for months after my burn gotten for my first piece of armor.
Really? Asked Obi-Wan.
Yes. You'll notice he didn't even tell us to go away more than once.
Mace shook his head in dismay. He definitely preferred Sutra to Nee, but to admit he was a bit biased.
Now,
said Holden, turning to them both and holding out one of the trackers.
Can we weave this into his braid? I think that's the most likely thing to stay attached in an emergency. We can put the rest in his clothes and boots.
It wasn't a bad idea, and embellishments to the Padawan braid were perfectly fine.
We should glue some small loops on it so it doesn't get dislodged by accident, but I don't see why not.
It was only after he had woven it into Obi-Wan's hair later that day that Mace realized both he and Holden had just assumed that Obi-Wan would be adopted again, as a matter of course. Jocasta found the fact that Tade Vizsla had visible traces of Tong ancestry as fascinating as Jaster. Part of this was because there had never been a recorded Tong with force sensitivity, though Jocasta suspected that even if there was, they never had told it to the Republic or Jedi historians. The other part was because of the nature of Mandalorian, and by extension, Tong society. Namely, that they were known to accept members of any species wholeheartedly into their society, and in the case of the Mandalorian Crusaders, forcefully. It was a unique case where the original parent species of a culture was thought to have essentially bred itself out by accepting so much outside blood. But Jocasta suspected that wasn't the whole story. She had seen traces of Tong ancestry written on the bodies of the Concordian farmers who fought yesterday. Mandalorian society was a nomadic culture at its heart. Even Jaster, who had a home base in Keldabe, confessed that in normal times his people's mercenary and bounty hunter jobs kept only a small smattering of them on the planet at a time. This included their Mandalore, though Jocasta imagined that would change now that he had the allegiance of most of the clans. Her theory, which she had already shared with Jaster, was that those who did live on Mandalore and other planets in the Mandalore sector permanently would show more Tong ancestry since they had less opportunity for the genetic mixing of the more nomadic members of their society.
Do you perhaps know anything about your family who gave you to the temple?
She asked in Mandoa. It was easier for them to use the language to avoid the linguistic drift in standard.
Alas, I don't. I was handed to a searcher when I was 2 years old, and I have only memories of impressions of emotions from before. My visions of the past never showed me my exact family, though I have seen many clan members going back thousands of years. When I went to Mandalore to explore my heritage, as all Jedi were encouraged to do then and now, The main leader of Clan Vizsla and her family welcomed me, but the clan was large enough that they didn't keep track of other members.
He looked upset, as he had whenever they asked of his clan.
They still are the largest clan,
offered Jaster. Tare gave a minute shake of his head, rejecting the comfort. Jaster's comm beeped, interrupting their research session. Jaster gave her an apologetic look, but she understood the burdens of a leader and was more surprised that they'd been uninterrupted for an entire hour.
Mandalore, said the voice out of the comm once he triggered it. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Holdan Law, Mace Windu, and Faye are here saying you requested for Obi-Wan to come when he was able. Yes, I did. Lead them to my quarters.
Jocasta noted that Tare's face brightened at the words. He was quite attached to young Obi-Wan, considering he'd only met him once, though being Mandalorian, that was hardly surprising. She and Jaster mutually moved their pads with their notes to a small table nearby. They'd regroup to see which questions they still needed to ask of Tare, while the holocron talked to Padawan Kenobi. As Jaster welcomed everyone into the room, she noted the Padawan was moving much easier than he had on Concordia. The 3 Jedi of the group all radiated the leftover serenity of meditation, so she suspected they had been meditating to help heal the boy's injuries.
Obika!
Tare's smile was wide and sharp.
It'd be good to see you well.
Master Vizsla,
Obi-Wan gave a bow and a Mandalorian salute at the same time.
I'm glad my abductors didn't disturb your temple.
I'm more disturbed by their actions. My clan owes you a debt, Adika.
No, Master, Death Watch is not Clan Vizsla.
Jocasta nodded approvingly. The Padawan had a good head on his shoulders, despite all the trouble he seemed to get into.
Their sins will be the same,
snarled Tare.
They have made the clan their lander.
Surely you cannot blame the entire clan,
interjected Mace in an attempt to spare his Padawan from what was no doubt a burgeoning rant.
I can blame whoever I want,
said Tare mutinously, but he was successfully diverted.
Who are you?
I'm Obi-Wan's master, Mace Windu, and this is Holdan Law, his boy.
Oh, you Jatakarak Shabor!
Tare was calling either Holdan or Mace a lucky bastard, which made Jaster stifle a snort next to her.
Master, can you tell me more about your vision and how you prepared the temple? I have visions as well, but Master Yoda says that the future is always in motion.
Tare immediately went into teaching mode, which allowed Jocasta to turn her attention back to their notes. Except Faye had wandered over to where they were sitting. She looked serene, but Jocasta sensed mischief under the facade as she met their eyes. Would you like to see the hollow of Yoda's face when he found out Mace had taken Obi-Wan as his Padawan and enjoyed my lineage? Jocasta was enjoying the opportunity the celebration of the Battle on Concordia presented to observe Mandalorian culture without too much interference. Oh, the Mandalorians still kept an eye on the Jedi that were near them, but the crowds of people clustered around bonfires scattered across the plaza made it hard for them to give the Jedi the laser focus that had been present when the Jocasta first arrived on the planet. Jaster had started the festivities on a solemn note, with remembrances for the dead who had joined the Manda, the collective afterlife where all Mandalorians who weren't Armando went when they died. That was followed by a brief account of the battle. Jaster held a lit lightsaber aloft when it came to mentioning he had won it from Vizsla. Overall, it was a short speech before the festivities started. Jaster was swarmed by those who wished to swear the Rizzlenair who hadn't been on Concordia, so Jocasta had gone to wander the gathering and observe. Jan had appointed himself a silent bodyguard to Jaster for the evening since he wasn't one for big raucous gatherings. The bonfires had cleverly been placed into craters scattered across the plaza, which kept them contained, but she noted a lot of hyper-vigilant Mandos guarding the edges from any children who strayed nearby. There didn't seem to be any set activities for the celebration. She heard people telling tales of the battle, stories of those who had passed on, bragging about who had taken the most hollows with the Jedi, semi-serious debates about who had the cutest ad, wrestling matches and fist fights, which Red is completely serious, but also casual in the Force. The list went on. Food was served communal style along the edges of the plaza, along with metal barrels of Netragal, a black ale. It seems you had to bring your own tihar if you wanted something stronger. After the sun set, the trays of spicy food were replaced with plates of uji cake, a very sweet cake made of nuts, spices, and syrup. This seemed to be the last delight for the children before they were ushered off the bed, though how the parents would get them to sleep after having so much sugar was beyond Jocasta's understanding. The celebration grew a little more wild once the children left as people got more drunk and relaxed. Jocasta noted more fights breaking out, and one corner of the plaza was reenacting the battle chants from Concordia, which was resulting in a lot of drunken collisions. Jocasta got drawn into one fire where they were seriously writing an account of the battle on pieces of flimsy in the grand style of the Duarer de Verda. The verses of Jaster's modified battle chant made up the chorus. She got up to get something to drink when a Mandalorian in mismatched, colorful armor stumbled in front of her. "Pretty dandy! That's..." The very drunk speaker had been tackled by two other Mandalorians and wrestled them to the ground, bound them with some rope, and carted them out of there with impressive efficiency. Another Mandalorian stepped near her, standing straight. "He won't be bothering you again, Lord." "Are you part of a fan club?" Jocasta didn't allow her trepidation to leak into her voice. It had been less than a day since she used the lightsaber rifle. "No, Lord. We're a self-formed group to make sure the Jedi have a good time tonight and aren't put off by Dakute." They thumped their chest plate once, then headed off, tailed by a few other alert-looking Mandos. Well, it took all types. And speaking of her preferred type, it looked like Jaster had dealt with all those sparing the muzzle there and was simply enjoying drinks with his people. Rather than getting a drink, maybe it was time to get to bed. "Joe," he said when he saw her at the edge of the relaxed crowd around him. His whole face lit up with a smile. It made her feel warm. "Mandalore?" she said once she was close enough, adding an emphasis to the title and an inclined head. For a moment, his face said, "Not you, too," before he realized she was teasing him. "Joe." He was pouting at her. She laughed and came to stand next to him, taking his arm. "Are your official duties done, Mandalore?" They were at the center of quite a few envious eyes. "Well," said Jaster slowly, eyes focused on her face, as if he could sense she was feeling a bit mysterious. "I haven't tended to my Jedi guests yet." "You shouldn't be remiss," she said as sternly as was possible, with Jaster smiling at her. "Never." He placed his half-drunk mug on the ground, then tucked her arm more firmly against his. "Richabure!" The phrase literally translated as "goodbye, bastards!" But Jocasta suspected it was affectionate use in this case, since many of them laughed. Some shouted also affectionate curses back, or "Koyasi!" which, with drinks in hand, probably meant tears. But there were definitely a few who were using the other meaning of the word, which was "stay alive!" as if she was some rancor that was going to devour him. She turned to look back into the shadows where her tallest friend had been lurking, no doubt trying to avoid as many drunk Mandalorians as possible. He did so hate it when people acted undignified. "You coming, Jan?" "I didn't realize I was invited." There was a pause as he studied them both, no doubt trying to decide if he was interested in intimacy tonight. "How about you?" "Excellent," said Jocasta as Jan went to stand on Jaster's other side. "Between the two of us, we should be able to convince him to keep the cape on." "Do!"